The scent of lemon polish clung to my fingertips as I worked the cloth across the mahogany surface of Massimo's desk, the same desk I'd cleaned every Tuesday morning for 8 years. My lower back ached with that familiar, dull throb that came from hours of bending and reaching. But I'd learned long ago to work through the discomfort. The early September sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the study, casting geometric patterns across the Persian rug beneath my feet. I paused to adjust the silver-framed photograph on the corner of the desk, the one of Massimo and his late brother Marco, taken years before I'd started working here. My fingers lingered on the frame for just a moment, remembering the weeks after Marco's death when this entire mansion had felt like a tomb, when Massimo had barely spoken to anyone, and I'd moved through these rooms like a ghost, maintaining order in the only way I knew how. "Marina, when you finish in the study, Signora Ferretti wants to see you in the morning room." Rosa's voice broke through my thoughts. She stood in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral, but I caught the flicker of concern in her eyes. My stomach tightened. In the 3 months since Massimo had married Bianca, I'd learned to recognize that particular tone in the other staff members' voices. The young Signora, as we were required to call her, had very specific ideas about how the household should run, ideas that often contradicted the systems we'd perfected over years of working for Massimo. "Thank you, Rosa," I replied, setting down my polishing cloth and smoothing my black uniform dress. "Did she say what she needed?" Rosa shook her head, but her lips pressed together in a thin line before she turned and disappeared down the hallway. I took a steadying breath, checking my appearance in the ornate mirror above the fireplace. My dark hair was pulled back in its usual neat bun, my uniform pressed and spotless, my face carefully composed in the professional expression I'd mastered long ago. The walk to the morning room felt longer than usual. My practical shoes made soft sounds against the marble floors, passing through corridors lined with artwork that I'd dusted countless times, their value so astronomical that I'd stopped trying to comprehend it years ago. The morning room sat at the eastern corner of the mansion, Bianca's favorite space, all cream and gold with fresh flowers delivered daily. I knocked softly on the doorframe. "Signora, you wanted to see me?" Bianca turned from the window where she'd been standing, her young face arranged in an expression I'd come to recognize over these past months. She was beautiful in the way magazine covers demanded, all sharp cheekbones and designer clothes, her blonde hair falling in perfect waves. But there was a hardness around her eyes, a tightness in her smile that never quite reached the rest of her features. "Marina, yes." She gestured to one of the chairs, but didn't sit herself, preferring to remain standing, to maintain the physical advantage of looking down at me. "We need to discuss your position in this household." My hands folded in my lap, fingers interlacing to hide their sudden trembling. "Of course, Signora. Is there something I can improve in my work?" She laughed, a sound like crystal breaking. "Your work is fine, Marina. Adequate, even. That's not the issue." She moved closer, her perfume, something floral and expensive, filling the space between us. "The issue is that you've been here too long. You've become too comfortable, too familiar." The words landed like physical blows, but I kept my expression carefully neutral. "I've always tried to maintain proper professional boundaries, Signora." "Have you?" Her voice sharpened. "You arrange my husband's study exactly how he likes it. You know his morning routine better than I do. You've been in his life longer than I have." She paused, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the marble windowsill. "That kind of familiarity is inappropriate, don't you think?" I felt the blood drain from my face. "Signora Ferretti, I assure you, my relationship with Signor Ferretti has always been entirely professional. I'm simply good at my job because I've been doing it for a long time." 8 years, she said, her tone making it sound like an accusation. 8 years of being the woman who knows all his secrets, who's there for every important moment, who he trusts implicitly. She turned to face me fully now, her blue eyes cold. "Well, I'm his wife now, Marina. I'm the woman who should know everything about him. I'm the one he should trust. Not the help." The casual cruelty of that last word stung more than I wanted to admit. I'd never been just the help to Massimo, or at least I'd allowed myself to believe I wasn't. I was the person who'd been there when Marco died, who'd maintained this house through Massimo's darkest period, who'd earned his respect through years of quiet loyalty. "I understand that you're his wife, Signora," I said carefully. "I would never presume to—" "You're fired." The words fell into the space between us with brutal finality. I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "You're fired," Bianca repeated, and now there was satisfaction in her voice, in the slight curve of her lips. "Effective immediately. You have 1 hour to collect your personal belongings and leave the property." My mind reeled, trying to process this sudden shift. "But, Signora, I haven't done anything wrong. If there's been a complaint about my work, surely I deserve to know what it is, to have a chance to—" "There's no discussion to be had, Marina." She moved to the door, her hand on the handle. "I've already spoken with the payroll department. You'll receive your standard severance, nothing more. 1 hour. And please use the service entrance when you leave. I don't want the other staff to see you making a scene." "A scene?" The word came out sharper than I'd intended. "I've worked here for 8 years. I deserve at least an explanation. A proper—" "What you deserve," Bianca interrupted, her voice dropping to something dangerous, "is exactly what I choose to give you. This is my house now, Marina. My husband's house. And I won't have someone lurking around who thinks she has some special claim to his attention or his trust." The truth beneath her words crystallized in that moment. This wasn't about my work or professional boundaries. This was about a young woman, barely 25 years old, who'd married a powerful man and found that power didn't automatically translate to security. She was threatened by me, by the years I'd spent in Massimo's life, by the quiet respect he'd always shown me. "Does Signor Ferretti know about this?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Her smile widened. "My husband is in New York on business. He won't be back until Friday. By then, you'll be long gone, and we can both spare him the unpleasantness of having to choose between his wife's comfort and his employees' feelings." She opened the door wider. 1 hour, Marina. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I stood on shaking legs, pride warring with shock. Part of me wanted to argue, to demand to speak with Massimo directly, to fight for the position I'd earned through years of dedicated service. But another part of me, the part that had survived by reading the dynamics of power in this house, knew that fighting would only make this worse. "I understand, Signora." I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'll be gone within the hour." As I walked back through those familiar corridors for what would apparently be the last time, I passed Rosa in the hallway. She took one look at my face, and her own crumpled with understanding. "She didn't," Rosa whispered. "She did." My voice felt hollow. "I have an hour to pack." Rosa's hand found mine, squeezed it briefly. "Massimo won't let this stand. When he finds out—" "He's in New York until Friday," I interrupted. "And by then it won't matter. His wife has made her decision." In my small room on the 3rd floor, the space that had been mine for 8 years, I began pulling my belongings from drawers and closets. It wasn't much. A few changes of clothes, some photographs, the rosary my grandmother had given me before she died. Everything else in this room belonged to the house, to the Ferretti family, to a life that had just been ripped away from me without warning. My hands shook as I folded a sweater, and I had to stop, pressing my palms flat against the dresser to steady myself. 8 years. 8 years of loyalty, of discretion, of being there through deaths and deals and dark nights when Massimo had needed someone who wouldn't judge him, wouldn't ask questions, would simply exist as a steady presence in his chaotic world. And now, Bianca, who'd known him for less than a year, had decided that loyalty was a threat. I glanced at the clock. 40 minutes left. I needed to hurry, needed to leave before I did something foolish like cry in front of the other staff, or worse, beg Bianca to reconsider. My pride might be all I had left after today, but I would keep it intact. As I zipped up my small suitcase, the one I'd brought with me 8 years ago when I'd first arrived at this mansion as a nervous 23-year-old hoping to prove herself, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. The same dark eyes, the same careful expression. But there was something else there now too. A kind of hollow recognition that the life I'd built here, the security I'd found, could be dismantled in minutes by someone who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to be removed. The service entrance, Bianca had said. Use the service entrance, as if even my departure needed to be hidden, shameful, invisible. I picked up my suitcase and took one last look at the room that had been my sanctuary, my home. Then I walked out, closing the door softly behind me, just as I'd been trained to do everything in this house. Quietly, efficiently, without making a scene. But as I descended the back stairs toward the service entrance, passing through the kitchen where Cook was crying openly and Rosa stood with her arms crossed and her face furious, I couldn't help but wonder what Massimo would do when he returned to find me gone. If he would even notice. If Bianca's version of events would be the only truth he heard. The thought made my chest ache in a way I couldn't quite name, a loss that went deeper than just a job, deeper than security. Because for 8 years, I'd allowed myself to believe that I mattered here, that my presence had value beyond the tasks I performed. Now, stepping out into the late morning sunlight with my single suitcase and nowhere to go, I understood how foolish that belief had been. The small apartment I'd managed to secure 3 days after my dismissal sat on the 4th floor of a building in Dorchester, a far cry from the marble halls and manicured gardens of the Ferretti mansion. The walls were thin enough that I could hear my neighbors' conversations. The radiator clanked and groaned through the night, and the single window overlooked a parking lot rather than the Charles River. But it was mine, or at least it would be for as long as my severance lasted. I'd spent those first 72 hours in a fog of practical necessities, finding housing, updating my resume, registering with employment agencies. Movement kept the hollow feeling at bay, kept me from dwelling on the sudden absence of routine that had structured my life for nearly a decade. But at night, lying on the second-hand mattress I'd bought from a thrift store, the reality would crash over me in waves. It was Thursday evening when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer, didn't recognize the number, but something, instinct perhaps, made me swipe to accept the call. Marina Lopez? A male voice, vaguely familiar. Speaking. This is Antonio, Signor Ferretti's driver. A pause. He's been trying to reach you. My heart stumbled over its next beat. Antonio had been with Massimo almost as long as I had, a quiet man who spoke little but observed everything. I've been staying elsewhere, I managed. I'm no longer employed at the house. I know. Antonio's voice lowered. We all know. He found out this morning when he returned early from New York. The entire house has been in chaos since he discovered you were gone. I sank onto the edge of my bed, my free hand pressed against my stomach where a nervous knot had formed. Antonio, I don't think it's appropriate for me to. He's furious, Marina. Antonio cut through my protest. I've driven for Signor Ferretti for 9 years. I've seen him angry. But this is different. He wants to know where you are. His wife made it very clear that my presence was no longer welcome. I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. I'm not going to cause problems in his marriage. His marriage is already having problems, Antonio replied bluntly. Signora Bianca didn't tell him she'd dismissed you. He found out when he went looking for you this morning and found your room empty. He asked the staff what happened. Rosa told him everything. The image formed in my mind. Massimo returning to the mansion, perhaps carrying that leather briefcase he always took to New York, calling my name to help him with something trivial, the way he had hundreds of times before. And finding nothing, no response, no familiar face appearing around the corner with that quiet smile and efficient competence he'd come to rely on. What did Bianca say? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. At first, she tried to claim you'd been insubordinate, said you'd been inappropriate with the signor, had overstepped boundaries. Antonio's voice carried a note of disgust, but Rosa and Cook contradicted her story, told him exactly what had happened in the morning room, how you'd done nothing wrong, how the signora had simply decided you were a threat and gotten rid of you. My eyes burned with tears I refused to let fall. Rosa and Cook had risked their own positions to defend me, to tell Massimo the truth. The loyalty of it, the solidarity, made my throat tight. Marina, he needs your address, Antonio continued. He's been calling your old phone number, but it goes straight to voicemail. I had to get a new phone, I admitted. Cheaper plan. I couldn't afford. I stopped myself, pride stinging. It doesn't matter. Antonio, please tell Signor Ferretti that I appreciate his concern, but I don't want to cause any more trouble. His wife had every right to dismiss me if she felt. Don't. Antonio's voice turned sharp. Don't do that, Marina. Don't diminish what happened to spare someone's feelings. You were dismissed without cause after 8 years of impeccable service because an insecure woman couldn't stand that her husband respects you. That's not right. And Signor Ferretti knows it. I stood, pacing the small space between the bed and the window. What does he want from me, Antonio? What could possibly be accomplished by... He wants to make it right. The simple statement stopped me mid-step. Marina, in all the years I've known him, I've never heard Massimo Ferretti apologize for anything. But this morning, he apologized to the entire staff for what his wife did. He told us that you were family, that you'd been there through the worst period of his life, and that he wouldn't allow anyone to erase that, wife or otherwise. Family. The word echoed in my mind, carrying a weight I'd never allowed myself to acknowledge before. I'd been staff, an employee, a trusted one perhaps, but still someone who received a paycheck and followed orders. But family? He can't just override his wife's decision, I said quietly. That would humiliate her, damage their marriage. I won't be responsible for... He already did. Antonio's words fell like stones. This morning, in front of Bianca and the entire household staff, he voided your dismissal. Told Bianca that she had no authority to fire anyone who'd been with the family as long as you had without consulting him first. He's drawn up new papers, Marina, not just reinstating you, but promoting you to head of household staff, doubling your salary, giving you authority over household decisions that even Bianca will have to defer to. The room spun around me. He can't do that. That would make me... His right hand in the household, Antonio finished. The person responsible for maintaining the standards and systems that have kept that mansion running smoothly for years. The position you should have had long ago if his pride hadn't kept him from admitting how much he depends on you. I sank back onto the bed, my mind reeling. This wasn't just reinstatement. This was Massimo making a public statement about my value, about where I stood in the hierarchy of his household, about who had the real power within those walls. And by doing it so publicly, so decisively, he was telling Bianca exactly how little her jealousy and insecurity meant compared to years of proven loyalty. I need to think, I whispered. Think fast, Antonio replied. He's determined to speak with you personally. If you don't give me your address, he'll find it another way. You know how he is when he wants something. I did know. Massimo Ferretti didn't accept obstacles or delays when he'd made a decision. He would use every resource at his disposal, call in favors, leverage connections, until he found what he was looking for. The only difference would be whether I made it easy or difficult. And what would making it difficult accomplish, really? My pride would be satisfied for a few more days, maybe a week, but he would find me eventually. And in the meantime, I'd be living in this cramped apartment, burning through my severance, pretending I didn't miss the life I'd lost. I'm at 847 Dorchester Avenue, I heard myself say. Apartment 4C. Antonio was quiet for a moment. He'll come tonight, Marina. Be ready. The call ended, and I sat in the gathering darkness of my apartment, looking around at the sparse furnishings, the unpacked boxes in the corner, the life I'd been trying to convince myself I could build from nothing. My grandmother's rosary sat on the small nightstand, the beads worn smooth from years of her prayers. I picked it up, letting the familiar weight settle in my palm. What would you tell me to do, Abuela? I whispered to the empty room. But I knew what she would say. She'd always told me that true respect was rarer than gold, that loyalty deserved loyalty in return, that pride should never blind you to genuine care. She'd also warned me about the dangers of getting too close to powerful men, but she'd lived in a different world, a different time. I stood and began the ritual of preparing for a meeting I both dreaded and desperately wanted. Changed from my worn jeans and t-shirt into the simple black dress I'd bought for job interviews, pulled my hair into its familiar bun, applied minimal makeup with steady hands despite the chaos in my chest. An hour later, exactly at 8 o'clock, a knock sounded at my door. Not the impatient pounding of a neighbor or the tentative tap of a delivery person, but 3 measured knocks that somehow conveyed authority and respect in equal measure. I opened the door. Massimo Ferretti stood in my dingy hallway, looking completely out of place in his tailored charcoal suit, his dark hair slightly disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. His face, usually so carefully controlled, showed the strain of the past days, lines of tension around his eyes and mouth. But it was his expression that stopped my breath, a mixture of relief and something deeper, something that looked almost like pain. "Marina," he said, and the way he spoke my name, like a man finding water after days in the desert, made my carefully constructed defenses begin to crumble. "Signor Ferretti." I stepped back, gesturing to the small space. "Please, come in." He entered, and immediately the apartment felt even smaller, his presence filling it entirely. His eyes swept the room, taking in the second-hand furniture, the bare walls, the single window with its view of the parking lot. I saw his jaw tighten, saw his hands curl into fists at his sides before he deliberately relaxed them. "This is where you've been living," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. "It's adequate for my needs," I replied, defensive despite myself. "The rent is reasonable, and it's close to the bus line for job interviews." "Job interviews." He turned to face me fully. "You've been looking for new employment." "Of course, I have bills to pay, and my severance won't last forever." Something in his expression shifted, darkened. "Your severance. The pittance Bianca authorized before throwing you out like garbage." The bitterness in his voice startled me. I'd seen Massimo angry before, had witnessed his cold fury directed at business rivals and those who'd crossed him. But this was different. This anger had a personal edge to it, a depth of feeling I'd never seen him display over a household matter. "She had her reasons," I said carefully. "She's your wife, Signor Ferretti. She has every right to manage the household as she sees fit. Don't defend her to me." The words came out sharp, harder than I think he'd intended, because he took a breath and gentled his tone. "Marina, I know what happened. I know what she said to you, how she humiliated you in front of the other staff, how she gave you an hour to pack 8 years of your life into a single suitcase." He stepped closer. "And I know why she did it." I looked away, unable to hold his gaze. "She felt I was too familiar, that I'd overstepped boundaries." "She was jealous," he corrected bluntly. "Jealous of your competence, of the staff's respect for you, of the fact that I trust you with things I don't trust her with." He paused. "Jealous of the fact that you've been in my life longer than she has and that I value your presence." The admission hung in the air between us, heavy with implications I wasn't ready to examine. "That doesn't matter now," I said quietly. "What's done is done. I've moved on." "Have you?" He gestured around the apartment. "Moved on to this? To living in a space barely larger than your bedroom in my home? To hunting for jobs that will never appreciate your skills the way I do? To pretending that 8 years meant nothing?" "They meant everything." The words burst out before I could stop them. "That's the problem, Signor Ferretti. They meant everything to me. And apparently, that made your wife uncomfortable. So yes, I'm trying to move on, to build a life that doesn't depend on your household, on your trust, on..." I stopped myself, swallowing the rest of the sentence. "On what?" He pressed, moving closer. "On me?" I turned toward the window, needing to put distance between us. "You're married now. Your wife should be the person you depend on, the person you trust, not your housekeeper." "You were never just a housekeeper, Marina." His voice came from right behind me now, close enough that I could smell his cologne, that familiar scent of cedar and bergamot that had been part of my daily life for so long. "You were there when Marco died. Do you remember that?" How could I forget? The night the call had come, the sound of Massimo's raw grief echoing through the halls, the way he'd sat in his study for hours, staring at nothing, the way I'd simply stayed, not offering platitudes or comfort he wouldn't have accepted, just existing in the same space, a silent presence that asked nothing of him. I remember, I whispered. You never asked me what happened. Never tried to get me to talk about it. You just stayed. His breath stirred my hair. Do you know how rare that is? Someone who understands that sometimes presence is more valuable than words? I was doing my job. No. His hand settled on my shoulder, gentle but firm. You were being family. And that's what I told Bianca this morning. That you weren't staff to be dismissed at her whim. You were family. And in my world, Marina, family is sacred. I turned to face him, and the intensity in his dark eyes made my heart stutter. Your world, I repeated. A world I've always kept at arm's length, Signor Ferretti. I clean your house. I maintain your schedule. But I've never asked questions about your business. Never wanted to know more than necessary. I know. A slight smile touched his lips. That discretion is part of why I trust you, but it doesn't change what you mean to me, to my household. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew an envelope. This is your new contract. Head of household staff. You'll oversee all domestic operations, manage the other staff, have final say on household decisions. The salary is more than fair. I stared at the envelope but didn't take it. And Bianca? How does she feel about this arrangement? His expression hardened. Bianca is learning that being my wife doesn't mean controlling everything in my life. She's learning that there are people who earned their place long before she arrived, and that jealousy isn't the same as authority. This will destroy your marriage, I said quietly. My marriage was built on shaky ground from the start, he replied. Beautiful, young, eager to be part of my world without understanding what that really means. I thought. He paused, something vulnerable crossing his face. I thought it was time to have a proper wife, a partner. But partnership requires respect, Marina. And Bianca has shown that she respects nothing but her own insecurity. I finally took the envelope, feeling its weight. If I come back, it won't be the same. The other staff will look at me differently. Bianca will resent me. You'll be caught in the middle of... I'm not in the middle of anything, he interrupted. I'm choosing a side. Yours. The side of loyalty and competence and the kind of trust that takes years to build. His hand found mine, warm and solid. Come home, Marina. Not as a servant. As the person who keeps my household running. Who maintains the standards that make it function. As family. The tears I'd been holding back for days finally spilled over. I don't want to cause you problems. You could never be a problem to me. His thumb brushed across my knuckles. Only a solution. Always a solution. And standing there in my cramped apartment, with Massimo Ferretti looking at me like I mattered more than pride or appearances, or the delicate feelings of an insecure wife, I felt something shift inside me. Not hope exactly, but recognition. Recognition that sometimes loyalty deserved to be rewarded, that years of service and discretion and quiet care had value that couldn't be dismissed with an hour's notice. When would you want me to start? I asked. His smile was genuine, reaching his eyes for the first time since he'd arrived. Tonight, right now. Antonio is waiting downstairs with the car. Of course he was. Massimo hadn't come here to persuade me. He'd come to bring me home. The drive back to the mansion felt surreal, like slipping into a dream I'd convinced myself was over. Antonio caught my eye in the rearview mirror, offered a small nod of approval, but said nothing. Beside me, Massimo remained quiet as well, his attention focused on his phone, rapidly typing responses to messages that apparently couldn't wait. But his other hand rested on the seat between us, close enough that I could feel its warmth, a deliberate positioning that felt like reassurance. We pulled through the iron gates just after 9 o'clock. The mansion rose before us, every window glowing against the night sky, as familiar to me as my own heartbeat. But now I was returning not as I'd left, dismissed and diminished, but as something else entirely. Something I still wasn't sure I understood. The staff are waiting, Massimo said, as Antonio brought the car to a stop at the main entrance. Not the service entrance. The main one, where guests arrived. I wanted everyone present when you returned. My stomach tightened. Signor Ferretti, is that really necessary? I'd prefer not to make this into some kind of spectacle." "It's not a spectacle." He turned to face me. "It's a statement about who you are, what you mean to this household, and what the consequences are for anyone who tries to diminish that in the future." The implication was clear. This wasn't just about me. This was Massimo sending a message to Bianca, to the staff, to anyone who might question his decisions. He was drawing a line, and everyone needed to see exactly where it fell. Antonio opened my door, and I stepped out onto the familiar stone driveway. The front doors opened, and there stood Rosa, cook, and the other household staff, all lined up as if greeting visiting dignitaries. But their faces showed genuine warmth, real smiles, especially Rosa, who was crying openly. Massimo's hand settled at the small of my back, guiding me forward. "Welcome home, Marina." As we climbed the steps, Rosa broke formation and pulled me into a fierce hug. "Thank God," she whispered against my ear. "Thank God he brought you back." "I'm not entirely sure what I'm coming back to," I admitted, low enough that only she could hear. "You're coming back to where you belong," she replied firmly. "Don't let anyone tell you different." The other staff members offered similar greetings, brief touches, whispered words of support. It was overwhelming, this public display of loyalty, and it made my eyes sting with fresh tears. These people had risked their positions to tell Massimo the truth about my dismissal. They'd stood up for me when I wasn't there to defend myself. "Where is the Signora?" I asked Rosa quietly as we moved into the foyer. Rosa's expression turned carefully neutral. "In her rooms. She's not pleased about the current situation." An understatement, I was certain. I could only imagine Bianca's fury at having her decision overridden so publicly, at being forced to accept my return in a position that actually gave me authority over household matters she'd probably hoped to control. Massimo must have heard the exchange because he turned to address the assembled staff. "Signora Ferretti will adjust to the new arrangements in time. But let me be clear to everyone here. Marina Lopez is now head of household staff. Her decisions regarding domestic operations are final. Any concerns or questions should be brought to her first, and she will consult with me as needed. This is not up for debate or discussion." The staff murmured their understanding, but I saw the flickers of concern in some faces. They were worried about Bianca's reaction, about the tension this would create, about being caught in the middle of a power struggle they wanted no part of. "You're dismissed for the evening," Massimo continued. "Marina, if you'll come with me to my study, we have details to discuss." I followed him through the familiar corridors, hyper-aware of the weight of what was happening. This wasn't a simple reinstatement. This was Massimo restructuring his household hierarchy and placing me at the top of it, above his wife in all matters of domestic management. It was unprecedented, potentially disastrous, and I still wasn't entirely sure why he was doing it. In his study, he gestured for me to sit in one of the leather chairs near the fireplace, then poured 2 glasses of water from the crystal carafe on his desk. He handed me one before taking the other chair, his long legs stretched out before him. "You're wondering why I'm really doing this," he said, reading my expression with the ease of long familiarity. The thought had crossed my mind, I admitted. He was quiet for a moment, swirling the water in his glass, his gaze distant. "When Marco died, this house became unbearable. Everywhere I looked, I saw memories of him. Every room held conversations we'd had, arguments, moments of brotherhood. The other staff tried to help, to offer comfort, but it felt invasive, like they were trying to fix something that couldn't be fixed. I remembered those dark weeks, the way the entire household had walked on eggshells, afraid to say the wrong thing, to trigger his grief in some unexpected way. But you," he continued, looking at me now, "you just existed alongside it. You didn't try to fill the silence or offer meaningless platitudes. You simply maintained order, kept the household running, gave me one constant in a world that felt like it was falling apart." His voice softened. "Do you know how valuable that was? How much I came to depend on that quiet competence?" "I was just doing my job," I said, the familiar refrain feeling hollow even to my own ears. "No." He leaned forward. "You were being exactly what I needed, even though I never asked for it, never acknowledged it properly. And when I married Bianca, I told myself it was time to move forward, to build something new. But I underestimated how much I'd come to rely on you, on the way you understand this household, on the trust we'd built. And then she fired me. I finished quietly. And then she fired you, he agreed. Without consulting me, without considering what it would mean to lose the person who'd been the backbone of this household for 8 years. She saw you as competition, as a threat to her position, and she eliminated that threat without a second thought. I took a sip of water, buying time to organize my thoughts. Signor Ferretti, I understand why you're upset about how it happened, but surely you can see her perspective. A new wife, trying to establish herself, finding that her husband's household already has an established hierarchy that doesn't include her at the top. Is that what you think this is? His eyes sharpened. Bianca feeling excluded? Marina, my wife has every opportunity to be involved in household decisions. She simply doesn't want to do the work. She wants the appearance of control without the actual responsibility. And when she realized you were the one who truly ran things, she resented it. The assessment was harsh, but, I suspected, accurate. In the 3 months since the wedding, I'd tried several times to include Bianca in household planning, to get her input on menu selections, staff scheduling, maintenance priorities. She'd shown interest for perhaps a week, before dismissing it all as boring details she didn't want to worry about. So you're giving me formal authority, I said, to make the hierarchy clear. I'm giving you the recognition you should have had long ago, he corrected. And yes, I'm making it clear to Bianca that she can't simply remove people from my life because they make her insecure. This household has standards, systems that work. I won't allow those to be destroyed because my wife prefers chaos to competence. There was an edge to his voice when he spoke about Bianca, a hardness that spoke of deeper problems in their marriage than just my dismissal. But I knew better than to ask about it directly. Instead, I asked, "What do you need from me, specifically? What are my actual responsibilities in this new role?" He relaxed slightly, moving into the practical territory where we both felt more comfortable. Overall management of household staff, budgeting for domestic expenses, coordination of maintenance and repairs, management of my personal schedule and appointments. You'll have access to the household accounts, authority to hire or dismiss staff as needed, and final say on all domestic matters unless I override you directly. The scope of it was staggering. This wasn't just a promotion. This was Massimo giving me control over nearly every aspect of his personal life that didn't directly relate to his business operations. And the Signora? I asked carefully. How do I handle conflicts with her? His expression hardened again. You bring them to me. Bianca will have to learn that throwing tantrums and making unilateral decisions isn't how this household operates. If she has legitimate concerns, we'll address them. If she's simply trying to assert dominance, I'll handle it. I set down my water glass, my hands folding in my lap in that familiar gesture of composure I'd perfected over the years. Signor Ferretti, I appreciate everything you're doing, truly. But I need you to understand something. I didn't leave because I wanted to. I left because I was dismissed, yes, but also because I didn't want to be the cause of problems in your marriage. And now, with this arrangement, I will be the cause of problems, serious ones. My marriage already has problems, he replied bluntly, problems that existed long before Bianca fired you. This just brought them into sharp focus. What kind of problems? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Too personal, too invasive. But Massimo didn't seem offended. If anything, he looked almost relieved to have someone to talk to about it. The kind where you realize you married someone for the wrong reasons. I thought Bianca would be a good wife, a good partner. She came from a good family, understood the expectations of my world. But I mistook surface-level charm for depth, and social skills for genuine care. He stood, moving to the window that overlooked the darkened gardens. She doesn't love me, Marina. She loves what I represent. The power, the wealth, the status. And I don't love her either. I respect her as my wife in public, treat her with courtesy, give her everything she could want materially. But there's no real connection, no partnership, just two people playing the roles they're supposed to play. The honesty of it stunned me. In 8 years, Massimo had rarely spoken to me about anything truly personal. Our interactions had always maintained professional boundaries, even at their most comfortable. This level of candor felt like crossing an invisible line. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "That must be difficult." He turned back to me, and something in his expression made my breath catch. "Do you know what I thought about when I found out you were gone? Not the inconvenience of finding a replacement, not the disruption to the household. I thought about how empty this place would feel without you in it. How wrong that seemed." "Signor Ferretti." "Massimo," he interrupted. "After 8 years, I think we can dispense with the formality when we're alone." The suggestion felt dangerous, like removing another barrier that had kept our relationship safely defined. "That wouldn't be appropriate." "Appropriate." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Marina, there's nothing appropriate about any of this. About me promoting you over my wife's objections. About me admitting that I value you more than I value her. About me standing here telling you that this house doesn't feel like home without you in it." My heart was pounding now, hard enough that I could hear it in my ears. "What are you saying?" He crossed back to me, kneeling so we were at eye level. "I'm saying that for 8 years, you've been the constant in my life. The person I trusted. The person who understood me without needing explanations. And I was too stupid, too concerned with propriety and expectations, to recognize what that meant." "It meant you had a competent employee," I managed, though my voice shook. "It meant I had someone who mattered," he countered. "Someone whose absence left a hole I can't ignore. Someone I need in my life in a way that has nothing to do with household management and everything to do with the fact that you make me feel less alone." I stood abruptly, needing distance. "You're married. Whatever you're feeling, whatever this is, you're married to someone else." "I know." He stood as well, but didn't move closer. "And I'm not asking you for anything inappropriate, Marina. I'm simply being honest about why your dismissal affected me so deeply. Why I can't accept a household that doesn't include you." "This is too much," I whispered. "Too complicated. I can't be the person who comes between." "You're not coming between anything," he interrupted. "Bianca and I have a marriage of convenience, of appearances. There's no deep love to betray, no sacred bond to break. We're civil roommates with a legal contract, nothing more. That doesn't make this right." "Perhaps not." He moved to his desk, pulling out the contract he'd shown me earlier. "But it doesn't change what I'm offering. A position, a salary, a formal recognition of your value to this household. What you choose to make of the rest, the personal elements, that's entirely your decision. I won't pressure you, won't make demands. But I won't pretend that having you back is purely professional either." I stared at the contract, at the crisp pages that represented a fork in the road I hadn't seen coming. I could take it, step back into this world with new authority and new complications. Or I could refuse, walk away, try again to build something separate from Massimo Ferretti and everything he represented. But even as I considered it, I knew what my decision would be, because he was right about one thing. This place felt like home in a way nowhere else ever had. These people felt like family. And Massimo, complicated and dangerous and inappropriate as it might be, mattered to me in a way I'd spent 8 years refusing to examine too closely. "I'll take the position," I said quietly. "On one condition." "Name it." "We maintain professional boundaries. Whatever personal feelings exist, we don't act on them. Your marriage might not be what you hoped for, but you made vows. I won't be the reason you break them." Something flickered in his eyes. Disappointment, perhaps, but also respect. "Agreed. Professional boundaries, I can work with that." He extended his hand, and I took it, feeling the warmth of his palm against mine, the strength in his grip. It was just a handshake, a formal agreement, nothing more. But as his fingers lingered a moment too long before releasing mine, I knew we were both lying to ourselves about how easy maintaining those boundaries would be. My first morning back began at 5:30, the same time I'd always started, though now I entered through the main entrance rather than the service door. My new quarters were on the second floor, in a suite that had previously been used for important guests. It included a sitting room, a bedroom larger than my entire apartment in Dorchester, a private bathroom with a soaking tub, and a small office where I could manage household affairs in privacy. Rosa had helped me unpack the night before, chattering nervously about how strange everything felt, how Bianca had locked herself in her room since Massimo's announcement and refused to come out, how Cook was convinced this would all blow over once the Signora calmed down. I knew better. This wouldn't blow over. This was a fundamental shift in the household power structure, and Bianca wasn't the type to accept it gracefully. I dressed carefully in a simple black dress, more elegant than my old uniform, but still professional, and made my way downstairs to the kitchen. Cook was already there, preparing Massimo's breakfast, and she beamed when she saw me. "Marina. Oh, it's so good to have you back where you belong. The Signor wants his breakfast in the morning room at 7, same as always. And he asked specifically that you join him." My stomach tightened. Having breakfast with Massimo wasn't unusual. I'd often reviewed the day's schedule with him over coffee. But doing it now, in this new dynamic, with Bianca presumably aware of every interaction, felt precarious. "Has the Signora requested breakfast?" I asked. Cook's smile faded. "She's still in her rooms. Had a tray sent up at midnight, barely touched it. Antonio said she spent most of yesterday making phone calls." To whom? I wondered. Her family? Friends? People who might sympathize with her position or help her undermine mine. At precisely 7, I entered the morning room carrying a leather folder with the day's schedule and household matters requiring attention. Massimo was already seated, reading something on his tablet, dressed in one of his impeccable dark suits. He looked up when I entered, and his expression softened in a way that made my heart skip. "Good morning, Marina. Please sit." I took the chair across from him, the same place I'd sat hundreds of times before. But everything felt different now, weighted with awareness and unspoken tension. "I have the weekly schedule for your review," I began, opening the folder. "You have a meeting with your accountants on Tuesday, dinner with the Castellano family on Thursday, and Marina." He set down his tablet. "Before we get into schedules, we need to discuss last night." I kept my expression carefully neutral. "Last night you offered me a position. I accepted. I'm not sure what else there is to discuss. What I said to you in my study, about why having you back matters." He leaned forward slightly. "I don't want there to be any awkwardness between us. You were right to set boundaries, and I'll respect them. But I also don't want you to feel uncomfortable because I was honest about my feelings." "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "But perhaps we should focus on the practical matters of my new role rather than the personal aspects." "Agreed." He nodded, though something in his eyes suggested he wasn't entirely convinced this was the right approach. "Have you had any contact with Bianca this morning?" "No. Cook says she's still in her rooms." "She won't stay there forever," he said. "Eventually she'll come out, and when she does, there will be a confrontation. I want you prepared for it." I'd been preparing for it since the moment I'd agreed to return. "What do you expect her to do?" "Try to undermine your authority with the staff, question your decisions, make your life difficult in small ways that she can claim are misunderstandings if I confront her about them." He picked up his coffee cup. "Bianca is good at manipulation, at playing the victim. She'll make herself seem wronged, make me seem cruel for overruling her, make you seem like an interloper threatening her marriage." "I am an interloper threatening her marriage," I pointed out, at least from her perspective. "You're the person keeping my household running smoothly," he corrected. "But yes, I understand her perspective even if I don't agree with it." Rosa entered with our breakfast, setting plates before us with her usual efficiency. But I caught the way her eyes darted between us, the slight furrow of her brow. Even she, my ally, was uncertain about the new dynamic. After she left, I asked the question that had been nagging at me since yesterday. "Why are you doing this, really? You could have reinstated me in my old position, given me a raise, made it clear to Bianca that she'd overstepped. But instead, you're promoting me to a position that effectively places me above her in household hierarchy. That's not just about valuing my competence. That's about making a statement." Massimo set down his fork, his gaze direct and unflinching. "You want the truth? The whole truth? Please. I'm tired, Marina. Tired of pretending my marriage is something it's not. tired of watching Bianca play at being interested in my life while showing no real care or understanding. Tired of maintaining appearances for the sake of social expectations. He paused. When I found out she'd dismissed you, something in me broke. Or maybe something that had been cracking for months finally shattered, and I realized I didn't want to pretend anymore. Pretend what? That I'm satisfied with a wife who sees me as an accessory to her lifestyle rather than a person. That I'm content with surface-level conversations and empty gestures. That I don't notice the difference between someone who's with me because of what I represent versus someone who stood by me because of who I am. The implication was clear, and it made my throat tight. Massimo, I've stood by you because you're my employer, because you've treated me fairly and paid me well. Don't romanticize our relationship into something it's not. Isn't it? He challenged. You could have left years ago, Marina. With your skills, your discretion, you could have worked for any of the families in Boston. Some of them offered you positions, I know they did. Higher pay, better hours. But you stayed. Why? I looked away, unable to hold his gaze. Because I was comfortable here. Because I knew the routine. Because this felt like home, he said softly. Because the people here became your family. Because somewhere along the way this stopped being just a job and became something more important. He wasn't wrong, and we both knew it. But admitting it felt dangerous, like opening a door I'd kept carefully locked for 8 years. That doesn't change the fact that you're married, I said quietly. Or that I'm now in a position where every interaction between us will be scrutinized, interpreted, used as evidence of whatever people want to believe. Let them believe what they want, he replied. I know the truth. You know the truth. That's what matters. Before I could respond, the door to the morning room opened. Bianca stood there, dressed in a silk robe, her hair loose around her shoulders, her face pale but composed. Her eyes went immediately to me, sitting at breakfast with her husband, and I saw the fury flare in them before she controlled it. How domestic, she said, her voice carrying that brittle cheerfulness that always preceded her worst moments. The happy employer and his newly promoted help, sharing a morning meal. Massimo's expression hardened. Bianca, I wasn't aware you'd be joining us. Clearly. She moved into the room, her movements deliberately graceful. I thought perhaps I should remind you both that I still live here, still have some claim to my husband's attention. You have every claim to my attention, Massimo replied, his tone carefully neutral. Marina and I were simply reviewing the household schedule as we've done for years. Ah, yes, the household schedule. So important. More important, apparently, than consulting your wife before making major staffing decisions. We discussed this yesterday, he said. My decision is final. Bianca's laugh was sharp. Your decision. How convenient that your decisions always seem to benefit her. She turned to me. You must be very proud of yourself, Marina. Fired 1 week, promoted the next. All because you've convinced my husband that he can't function without you. I stood, unwilling to remain seated while she loomed over me. Signora, I assure you, I never sought this position. Your husband offered it, and I accepted because I care about this household and the people in it. How noble, she sneered. The devoted servant, martyring herself for the good of the household. Tell me, Marina, do you really expect me to believe this is purely professional? That there's nothing personal in the way my husband looks at you, the way he speaks about you, the way he rushed to bring you back the moment he discovered I'd dismissed you? That's enough, Bianca. Massimo's voice cut through the room like a blade. You're out of line. Am I? She turned to him. Or am I finally seeing clearly what's been in front of me this whole time? You don't want a wife, Massimo. You want a glorified housekeeper who makes you feel understood and doesn't challenge you or make demands. Well, you have one now. I hope she makes you very happy. She swept out of the room, leaving a wake of tension behind her. Massimo and I stood in silence for a long moment. I'm sorry, he said finally. You shouldn't have to deal with that. She's not entirely wrong, I replied quietly. About how this looks, what people will think. She's wrong about your motives, he countered. About why you're here, why you accepted this position. Am I here purely for professional reasons? I asked, the question emerging before I could stop it. Because if I'm honest with myself, Massimo, I'm not sure anymore. I'm not sure when this stopped being just a job and became something I couldn't walk away from. Even when walking away was the smart choice. He moved toward me, and I saw him force himself to stop, to maintain the distance we'd agreed upon. What are you saying? I'm saying that Bianca might be insecure and manipulative, but she's not blind. She sees something between us, something that exists whether we act on it or not. And as long as I'm here, in this elevated position, that something will be a problem for your marriage. My marriage is already a problem, he said flatly. It was a problem before you came back, before Bianca fired you, before any of this started. The only thing your return has done is force me to stop pretending otherwise. And what happens when you stop pretending? I asked. What's the endgame here, Massimo? We maintain these professional boundaries while everyone whispers about us behind closed doors. We ignore the fact that your wife hates me and will do everything in her power to make my life difficult. We just exist in this impossible situation indefinitely? I don't have all the answers, he admitted. I just know that I need you here, that this house, my life, feels incomplete without you in it. Everything else we'll figure out as we go. It wasn't enough. It shouldn't have been enough. But as I looked at him, at the man who'd crossed the city to bring me back, who'd restructured his entire household to keep me in his life, who'd stood up to his wife and risked his marriage because he valued my presence that much, I found myself nodding. All right, I said softly. We'll figure it out as we go. His smile was worth every complication, every awkward moment, every whispered conversation that would follow. Because in that smile, I saw something I'd been trying to deny for longer than I wanted to admit. Massimo Ferretti didn't just value my competence or my loyalty. He valued me. And despite every reason I had to walk away, to protect myself from the inevitable heartbreak this situation promised, I valued him too. Enough to stay. Enough to fight for my place in his world, even knowing it would cost me more than I could imagine. Enough to risk everything. The following weeks settled into a routine that felt both familiar and utterly strange. I resumed my duties, now expanded to include oversight of all household operations, budgeting, staff management, and coordination of Massimo's personal schedule. The other staff adjusted to my elevated position with varying degrees of ease. Rosa and Cook were thrilled, treating me with the same warmth as before, while also deferring to my authority. The newer staff members, those who'd been hired during my absence, regarded me with cautious respect. And Bianca made her displeasure known in 1,000 small ways. She would countermand my instructions to the staff, then act surprised when I confronted her about it. She would schedule social events without consulting me, forcing last-minute scrambles to accommodate her plans. She made comments in front of guests about how devoted the help was, how some people just couldn't imagine working anywhere else, with pointed looks in my direction that everyone noticed but pretended not to. Massimo saw through every tactic, but confronting her about each incident would have meant constant conflict. Instead, he doubled down on his support for me, making it clear to everyone that my decisions had his full backing, that questioning my authority was questioning his. It created an impossible tension in the household, a silent war fought through scheduling conflicts and passive-aggressive comments and meaningful looks. But it was the nights that were hardest. I would lie in my elegant suite, listening to the sounds of the mansion settling around me, knowing that down the hall, Massimo was in the master bedroom with his wife. Knowing that despite the distance between them, despite his claims that their marriage was purely for show, they shared a space I would never be part of. The jealousy surprised me with its intensity, made me feel petty and small. One night, about 3 weeks after my return, I couldn't sleep. It was past midnight, and I'd been tossing restlessly for hours. Finally, I gave up, pulled on my robe, and made my way down to the kitchen, thinking a cup of chamomile tea might help. I wasn't expecting to find Massimo already there, sitting at the kitchen island in pajama pants and a t-shirt, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "Can't sleep either?" he asked, looking up as I entered. Apparently not. I moved to the kettle, trying to ignore how domestic this felt, how dangerously intimate. "Mind if I make tea?" "Of course not," This is your domain now, remember? I filled the kettle and set it to boil, then leaned against the counter, maintaining distance between us. Bad day? Bad month, he corrected, taking a sip of his whiskey. Bad marriage. Bad decisions catching up with me. Want to talk about it? He laughed softly. That's the problem, Marina. You're the person I want to talk to about everything. You're the person I trust, the person who understands me. And you're also the person I can't talk to about most of it because the subject is usually my wife and how much I regret marrying her. Have you thought about divorce? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Every day, he admitted. But it's complicated. Bianca's family has connections to people I do business with. A divorce would be messy, would potentially damage relationships I've spent years building. So you're stuck, I said quietly. For now. He set down his glass. But Marina, I want you to know something. This situation, with you elevated in the household, with Bianca making everyone miserable, it's not sustainable. Eventually, something will have to give. What do you think will give? He met my eyes. Probably my marriage. I can pretend for business, Marina, but I can't pretend in my own home. Not anymore. Bianca understands that I'll maintain appearances publicly, but privately, she's losing her hold on whatever claim she thought she had. The kettle whistled, and I poured water over my tea bag, grateful for the distraction. That will cause problems for you. Political problems, business problems. Let it. His voice carried a finality I hadn't heard before. I've spent my life making strategic choices, doing what was expected, what was smart. Maybe it's time I made a choice based on what I actually want. And what do you want? I asked, though I wasn't sure I was ready for the answer. He stood, moving around the island toward me. I made myself stay still, not retreat, as he stopped close enough that I could smell his cologne mixed with the whiskey on his breath. I want what I had before Bianca. Peace in my own home. Trust. Someone who knows me well enough that I don't have to explain everything, perform everything. His hand lifted, fingers brushing a strand of hair back from my face. I want you, Marina. Not in some scandalous affair, not sneaking around behind my wife's back, but honestly, openly, without shame. My breath caught. You're still married. For now, he repeated. But not forever. Bianca knows this isn't working. She's already reaching out to divorce attorneys, I've had it confirmed. She's just trying to position herself for the best settlement. And when she does file, when this goes public, everyone will know it's because of me. Let them know, he said simply. I'm tired of hiding what matters, of pretending my choices are motivated purely by strategy rather than genuine feeling. You matter to me, Marina. More than business connections, more than social standing, more than a marriage that was a mistake from the start. I should have stepped back, should have reminded him of the boundaries we'd agreed to maintain. But I didn't. Instead, I let myself lean into his touch. Just for a moment. Let myself imagine what it would be like if things were different. This is dangerous, I whispered. I know. We could both get hurt. I know that too. His thumb traced along my cheekbone. But Marina, I've spent years being careful, being strategic, protecting myself from risk. And where has it gotten me? A loveless marriage? A wife who resents me? A house that feels empty despite being full of people? The only time I feel at peace is when you're here. Massimo! The sound of footsteps in the hallway made us both freeze. I stepped back quickly, putting distance between us, just as Rosa appeared in the doorway. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize anyone was down here. She looked between us, her expression carefully neutral, but I knew she'd seen how close we'd been standing, had registered the tension in the air. Couldn't sleep, Massimo said smoothly. Marina was making tea. Would you like some? No, thank you. I just came for some water. She filled a glass at the sink, her movements brisk and efficient, then hurried back out. After she left, the moment was broken. The spell, whatever it had been, dissolved back into reality. I should go back to bed, I said quietly. Try to get some sleep. Marina, He caught my hand as I moved past him. What happened just now, what I said, I meant it. Every word. I looked down at our joined hands, at the way his fingers wrapped around mine with such easy familiarity. I know you did. That's what scares me. Don't be scared. His voice was soft, almost pleading. We'll figure this out, together. I gently extracted my hand from his. Good night, Massimo. Good night, Marina. I took my tea and left him there in the kitchen, alone with his whiskey and his regrets. But as I climbed the stairs back to my room, I knew that something fundamental had shifted between us tonight. The boundaries we'd tried to maintain were crumbling, had perhaps never really existed at all. And when Rosa caught me in the hallway the next morning, her expression was troubled. Marina, we need to talk, she said, pulling me into my office and closing the door. What I saw last night. Nothing happened, I interrupted. I know nothing happened, she replied. But Marina, the way you were looking at each other, the way you were standing. People are going to notice. Bianca is already watching for any excuse to cause trouble. You need to be more careful. I am being careful, I insisted, but the words felt hollow even to me. Are you? Rosa's eyes were concerned, not judgmental. Because from where I'm standing, you're falling in love with a married man who's falling in love with you right back. And no matter how unhappy his marriage is, no matter how much his wife deserves to be left, this isn't going to end well for anyone. I sank into my desk chair. I know. God, Rosa, I know. But I don't know how to stop it. How do you stop feeling something that's been growing for years without you even realizing it? She sat across from me, her expression softening. You can't stop feeling it, but you can choose not to act on it until the situation changes, until he's actually free. What if he never is? What if the business complications, the social consequences, they keep him trapped in this marriage indefinitely? Then you decide if waiting is worth it, she said simply. If he's worth it. The question haunted me through the rest of that day and into the weeks that followed. Was Massimo worth the risk? Worth the complications, the whispers, the inevitable scandal when everything finally came to light? I watched him navigate his deteriorating marriage with the same strategic precision he brought to his business dealings. Saw him maintain appearances at social events while growing increasingly distant from Bianca at home. Saw the way she responded with escalating hostility, making scenes, issuing ultimatums, trying to force him into choosing between his household arrangements and marital peace. He never chose her. Not once. And slowly, I began to realize that this wasn't about me forcing a choice or inserting myself into his marriage. This was about Massimo making decisions based on what he valued, what mattered to him, what he was willing to fight for, and apparently I was worth fighting for. The realization should have felt triumphant. Instead, it felt terrifying. Because now I had to decide if I was brave enough to fight back, to claim what we both clearly wanted, despite every reason to walk away. 6 weeks after my return, Bianca filed for divorce. The news broke on a Wednesday morning. I was in my office reviewing invoices when Massimo knocked and entered without waiting for permission, his face carefully controlled, but his eyes bright with something that looked almost like relief. Bianca's attorneys served the papers this morning, he said without preamble. She's filing for divorce on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. She's asking for a substantial settlement, the penthouse in the city, and ongoing monthly support. I set down my pen carefully. How do you feel about that? Like I should have done this months ago, he replied, moving to sit in the chair across from my desk. Like I've been released from a cage I built for myself out of social expectations and strategic thinking. The settlement she's asking for, is it reasonable? It's more than reasonable. It's extortion. He laughed, but there was no bitterness in it. But I don't care. I'll give her whatever she wants if it means ending this cleanly, quickly. I studied his face, trying to read beyond the relief to whatever else he might be feeling. There will be gossip. People will blame me. Let them, he said simply. Marina, I want to be clear about something. This divorce isn't happening because of you, not the way people will assume. Yes, your return highlighted how broken my marriage was. Yes, Bianca's jealousy of you accelerated the deterioration. But the marriage was doomed from the start. We were wrong for each other in fundamental ways that had nothing to do with you. People won't see it that way. I don't care what people see." He leaned forward. "What I care about is that for the first time in months, I can imagine a future that doesn't feel like a prison sentence. A future where I'm not constantly managing my wife's insecurities or pretending to be satisfied with superficial conversations and empty gestures." "A future that includes me?" I asked quietly. "If you'll have me." His eyes held mine. "I know this isn't the romantic declaration you probably imagined if you ever thought about this. I know I come with complications, with a reputation, with a world that isn't safe or simple. But I'm asking anyway. Because 8 years of working alongside you, of trusting you, of depending on your presence in my life, has taught me that I don't want to spend another day without you in it." My throat tightened with emotion. "Massimo, I need you to understand something. I didn't come back here hoping for this. I came back because this is my home, because these people are my family, because I missed the work and the routine, and yes, because I missed you. But I never expected—" "Neither did I," he interrupted gently. "I hired you 8 years ago because you were competent and discreet. I kept you on because you were excellent at your job. But somewhere along the way, you became the person I trusted most in the world. The person whose opinion mattered, the person whose presence made everything feel manageable." "That's a lot of pressure," I said, trying for lightness. "It's the truth." He stood, moving around the desk until he was standing beside my chair. "Marina, I'm not asking you to be my wife tomorrow. I'm not even asking you to be my girlfriend right now, while the divorce is pending. What I'm asking is for you to stay, to keep being exactly who you've been for 8 years. And when everything is final, when I'm actually free, then we can talk about what comes next." I looked up at him, at this powerful, dangerous man who ran an empire built on fear and respect, who could have anyone he wanted, who was choosing me, not despite my ordinary background and lack of social connections, but because of the quiet loyalty and steady competence I'd brought to his life. "I'll stay," I said softly. "Not because I'm waiting for you, but because this is where I belong, where I want to be." His smile was radiant. "That's all I'm asking." But of course it wasn't that simple. The next months were a hurricane of legal proceedings, public scrutiny, and social fallout. Bianca made sure everyone knew her version of events, that Massimo had carried on an emotional affair with his housekeeper, that he'd promoted me to humiliate her, that he'd chosen a servant over his wife. Some of our social circle believed her. Invitations dried up. Business associates treated Massimo with new wariness. There were whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, pointed looks when Massimo and I appeared together at household functions, but there were also defenders. Rosa and Cook spoke openly about how Bianca had treated me, about her unfounded jealousy and manipulative behavior. Antonio told anyone who would listen that Massimo's marriage had been troubled long before my return. Even some of Massimo's business associates privately admitted that Bianca had always seemed more interested in the lifestyle than the man. Through it all, Massimo and I maintained our professional relationship, our boundaries, even as everyone assumed we were already lovers. He never came to my room. I never went to his. We didn't hold hands or steal kisses or do any of the things the gossips claimed we were doing. But we grew closer in ways that had nothing to do with physical intimacy. He sought my opinion on business decisions, valued my perspective on personal matters, included me in conversations with his attorneys about household matters that would be affected by the divorce. I learned more about his empire, about the legitimate businesses and the less legitimate ones, about the careful balance he maintained between power and violence. And I accepted it. All of it. The danger, the moral complexity, the reality of loving a man whose world operated by different rules than the one I'd been raised in. The divorce was finalized on a cold day in February, 9 months after Bianca had first filed. The settlement was enormous, just as Massimo had predicted, but he signed the papers without hesitation. Bianca got the penthouse, the monthly support, and a lump sum that would keep her comfortable for life. And Massimo got his freedom. That night, he found me in the library, where I'd been pretending to read, but mostly just staring at the same page for an hour. "It's done," he said simply. I looked up. How do you feel? Relieved, exhausted. He sat beside me on the sofa. Free. That's good. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 9 months of waiting, of speculation, of maintaining boundaries while everyone assumed we were breaking them, settling over us. Marina, he began, then paused. I'm not good at this. At the romantic gestures, the pretty words. I'm better with actions than declarations. I know, I said softly. But I need you to know that these past months, watching you handle the gossip and the scrutiny, and Bianca's accusations with such grace and dignity, it only confirmed what I already knew. That you're the strongest person I've ever met. That you're exactly who I want by my side, in every way that matters. Massimo, let me finish. He turned to face me fully. I know I can't offer you a normal life. I know being with me means accepting things you'd probably rather not know about, dealing with people who will always wonder if you're with me for my money or my power. But I'm asking anyway, because I'm selfish enough to want you regardless of the complications. I set aside my book. You think I don't know what I'm getting into? I've worked for you for 8 years, Massimo. I've seen your world up close. I know exactly what being with you means. And I'm choosing it anyway. I took his hand. Not because you're powerful or wealthy, though those things are part of who you are, but because you're also the man who sat with me in silence when I was grieving my grandmother. The man who noticed when I was exhausted and sent me home early. The man who values loyalty above almost everything else. The man who fought for me when it would have been easier to let me go. His fingers tightened around mine. You're saying yes? I'm saying yes to trying. To seeing what we can build together now that we're both free to choose it. He pulled me into his arms, and for the first time in 8 years, I let myself lean into his embrace without guilt or hesitation. His lips found mine, gentle at first, then deeper, with all the hunger of months of wanting and waiting. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. Move into the master suite, he said, not as staff, as my partner, my equal. I laughed softly. That will cause more gossip. Let it. His arms tightened around me. I'm done caring what anyone thinks except you. 3 months later, I stood in that master suite, the room that had once belonged to Massimo and Bianca, now completely redecorated to reflect a new chapter. The staff had learned to address me by my first name, to understand that I was no longer head of household staff, but something else entirely. Massimo's partner in every sense that mattered. Rosa found me there one morning, standing by the window that overlooked the gardens. Happy? She asked simply. Terrified, I admitted. But yes. Happy. Good. She squeezed my shoulder. You deserve it, Marina. Both of you do. And as Massimo appeared in the doorway, his eyes finding mine with that expression of quiet devotion I'd come to treasure, I realized she was right. We did deserve this. Not because the path had been easy or uncomplicated, but because we'd chosen each other honestly, knowing all the flaws and complications and difficulties that came with it. I'd started as his maid, become his most trusted employee, survived his wife's jealousy and a very public divorce, and emerged as his equal partner. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real. And as he crossed the room to pull me into his arms, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them the same way we'd faced everything else, together.